Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to give people a couple of minutes to tune in before I get started. So just bear with me a second. So I'm going to give people a couple of minutes to tune in before I get started. We will get started in a second. Just give me a couple of minutes. Just want to give people time to tune in. And I want to share my screen. I'm going to do that in 1 second. So if you all could just bear with me a minute. Okay, I'm back. So let's get right into it. So, there have been some developments in the Jussie Smollett case. A lot of people have been talking about it. And I want to share some of these developments with you. But before I do so, I want to share my screen and show you all a video that I posted a couple of weeks ago, expressing my concerns about this particular case, expressing my doubts about this case, and actually raising the question about whether or not the whole thing was a hoax. This was before these developments came out. It was when we first heard the initial story. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see this video that I posted before. I'm not going to play the video. I'm just going to show you a screenshot of the video. Just bear with me 1 second. So here's the video that I did, and the video was, let's see what date that was when I did. This was January 31st, before all these developments came out. And in this particular video, I raised questions about the case, and I basically explained why I doubted his story, why his story didn't make sense to me. And what I'm going to do is just run through the basic information about his story, and then I'm going to go into detail about why I doubted his story. I'm going to talk about these developments, and I'm just going to talk about how people reacted when I raised the question about whether or not this is a legitimate hate crime that happened, whether or not this is actually real. So, as you all know, there had been reports that Jussie Smollett was a victim of a hate crime. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some things that he said in his interview as well. I want to talk about that. So basically, this is the situation. He claims that he went to this restaurant, Subway, at 2-something in the morning. He claims that someone shouted something to him, and then he got into an altercation with 2 people that were masked. He says that they were shouting racist and anti-gay slurs at him during this whole incident. He claims that they attacked him, they punched him and kicked him, and he claims that they put a noose around his neck and they threw some substance on him, which turned out to be bleach. And, he reported this crime. And according to all the information, all the reports that I have seen, there were cameras all in the area, but there was no footage of this actual incident that took place. So in his interview on ABC, he goes into more detail. And what I'm going to do is just go through, the points of his interview. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second. And I will be referring to my notes. I just finished watching his interview. He basically says that he went to Subway to get a salad at like 2-something in the morning. He says that he was hungry. He said he texted his manager, and then his manager called him back around the time when this incident happened. He claims that as he was crossing the intersection, someone shouted, Empire, basically referring to the show that he's on. And then they started to shout some racist and anti-gay slurs at this guy. He said that one of the attackers said this is mega country, you know, basically meaning make America great again country, expressing his support for Donald Trump as he proceeded to hit him. You know, so he says that somebody punched him in the face, and then he claims that he punched the person back, and then a second person jumped in and kicked him in the back. And then he says that, like, right after this incident, like, he later on looked down and he noticed that there was a noose around his neck. That was the first time he noticed the noose. And then, you know, during this interview, they asked him about this image of these two figures that was captured. There was some video footage of two people walking down the street that was captured later on. And he said something to, you know, they asked him, you know, do you recognize these people? Do you think these are the people that were involved? And he basically said that there's no doubt in his mind that those were the people involved. And then they asked him about why he didn't call the police. And immediately in response to that question, he actually starts to smile. You know, that's his first reaction. Then he starts to cry and all this and that. You know, he says that he didn't want to be considered weak by calling the police. And he says that he's not weak and that we are not from a weak people. And then he tries to explain why he kept the noose around his neck during that interview. He said he kept it around his neck so that the police could see that he had the neck, you know, that he had this noose around him so that he could show that he was, in fact, you know, there was this attack and that these people actually were trying to lynch him and all that kind of stuff. And he actually claimed that he had rope burns around his neck as well, you know, but I've seen the photos of him in the hospital. I didn't see any injuries around his neck, but that's what he claimed during this interview. He also talked about how people would take this crime more seriously if it had been a Muslim attacked or immigrant attacked or something to that effect, or if it had just been a racial attack. So now there have been some developments in the case, and I want to show my screen to you all. But before I do that, I want to run through like the reasons why I raised questions about this whole thing to begin with. And what I'm going to do is just look at some, you know, this message that I sent to a friend of mine on Facebook, because I had expressed my concerns about this situation. And she said, basically, well, why don't you believe this, what happened? Like, why don't you believe that this was a hate crime and stuff like that? Why don't you believe this, that this whole thing is real? And as you will see in the video that I did, you know, that I posted back on, I think it was January 31st, as I showed you all in the beginning, I outlined some of these reasons, but as there were developments, there were even more reasons that I added on to this list, and I will go through each one of them right now. So the first thing, the first red flag for me is the fact that there were video cameras everywhere in that area at that time where this incident took place, but there was no footage of this particular hate crime, even though you got cameras everywhere in that area. So that's suspect. You know, he claims that he was attacked and all this and that, but there's no video footage of it. The other thing that raised doubts for me is that he claimed that he was on the phone with his manager when this particular incident happened. But when the police asked him to turn over his phone records, this man was reluctant to do so. And when he finally did it, when he finally, succumbed to all the pressure and all that kind of stuff, he finally turned over his records. But when he turned them over, they were heavily redacted. They were redacted to the point that they were absolutely useless to the police. Who knows what was on those phone records? Why were they redacted? What was he trying to hide? When people redact things, they are trying to hide something. They don't want to reveal something. And the fact that they were heavily redacted says a lot. What if there were records that we'll go into where he was actually in contact with these supposed suspects? What if there are records of that? What if there are records of voicemails from these suspects and stuff? And we'll get into that a little bit later. The third point that that I had a question about is the fact that this guy actually kept a noose around his neck for 45 minutes after this crime took place. Something very traumatic as this, where somebody is literally trying to kill you. Somebody is literally trying to lynch you. And you want to keep the noose around your neck That doesn't add up to me. That makes zero sense to me, period. If somebody tried to lynch me, the first thing that I would do is take that noose off my neck. But it was so important to him to show the police that some hate crime took place that he found the need to keep that noose around his neck. And that's what, that's one of the points that he was saying during this interview. To me, that sounds like a prime example of staging something to give some kind of impression of something. So that was a big, huge red flag for me when I saw that. When I saw that he kept this noose around his neck for all that time period. And then, like, I'll just say this, during this interview, it seemed like this guy was doing nothing but acting. And it was bad acting at that. He's crying during this interview. He's melodramatic during that interview. And I'll post a link in the description box to that interview so that you can watch it for yourself and judge it for yourself and see just how fake he comes across, how phony he seems, fake tears and all that kind of stuff. A bad acting job. That's what it looked like to me. Trying to pull on people's emotions and stuff instead of dealing with the hardcore facts, trying to shame people, by talking about, basically saying people downplayed it because he's a homosexual, because it's a crime against a homosexual person. Guilt shaming people, shaming people into supporting him. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But that was an obvious red flag to me, the fact that he had this noose around his neck for such a long period of time. That was an indication to me, again, that he was staging something. And then, number 4 was, the fact that he brought up this whole Make America Great Again issue. He brought it up later, well after the first time he talked to the police. He threw that in. And to me, that sounded like embellishment. It sounded like he, somebody just adding something to make it more dramatic and to gain more sympathy, to rally people behind him. He threw in that Make America Great Again thing. That was my initial reaction when I heard that. And then, I was reading articles about how he alleges that he was in some kind of tussle with these people. Like they were fighting and all that kind of stuff. And according to the reports, he had road salt only on his sweatshirt, but it wasn't on the other parts of his body and stuff like that. So that's another issue. It seems like if you were in an altercation with somebody like that, you would have that stuff all over you. If you're tossing and turning and fighting on the ground and stuff, that stuff would be all over you. But on him, it's only on his sweatshirt, which doesn't make any sense. And then just like the whole nature of the story seemed completely far-fetched. That was the biggest thing. The whole story seemed completely far-fetched. Here we are talking about a situation where this guy is going to a restaurant at 2 a.m. in Chicago in this cold weather. Going to this restaurant, and there just happened to be 2 people with masks on at that particular time that just happened to identify him as somebody working on Empire, that just happened to be walking around in the cold ass winter in Chicago, the windy city, walking around with a damn noose. Hold on one second. Hold on one second, John. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I just had to make sure that that's not playing on my channel because I don't want these people trying to flag me for copyright issues. So that story in and of itself seemed extremely far-fetched, that you got these 2 guys walking around at 2-something in the morning with a noose and some bleach to just target this guy. They knew he was going to be out there 2 something in the morning. They immediately identified him. And then they yell empire and all this and that. It sounded like something that Hollywood script writers wrote when I heard that story. So that just rubbed me the wrong way, and it made the whole thing seem suspect. And as I said in my first video where I raised this question about whether or not this is a hoax, I asked, I basically talked about this stuff. I talked about the nature of what time this stuff happened and all that kind of stuff. It sounds like a something out of Hollywood, man. It sounds ridiculous, man. Frankly, it just sounds ridiculous. Another point that I thought about later, like as I heard more about this particular story, is this. He was reluctant to report this crime to the people in the apartment building, to the security in the apartment building. If somebody just tried to lynch me, somebody just put a noose around my neck, used all these racial slurs, attacked me, physically abused me, and all that kind of stuff. If I'm walking into a building that has security, the first thing that I want to do is report that crime to them. I would report the crime to the authorities. Now, he claims that he didn't report it because he thought that's weak and all that. I don't buy that explanation. That explanation didn't make any sense to me. And then he was reluctant to report this crime to the police, which again doesn't make any sense to me at all. So those were some of the reasons why I doubted this whole story, why I questioned the whole story, why I asked whether or not it was a hoax. And, I felt bad just raising that question, just asking the question, because when something happens to our people, I want to believe them. I don't want to, be in a position where I'm basically, taking, their word for granted or not believing them or, indirectly defending white people by questioning his story. So I was reluctant to even post that video. And when I posted the video, I said, I would take it down if I ended up being wrong. I had all these disclaimers and stuff like that, but it's like my instinct proved right. But yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. You've been a victim of a hate crime. Somebody has brutally attacked you, and you're not going to report it to security right in your own building right after this crime happened? That doesn't make sense. But anyway, I'm going to look at your comments before I go into like exactly what these developments say, and then after that, I'm going to go into the details about like my just my commentary about this issue. Just share some of my thoughts about the whole thing. So let me see what you all are saying real quick. Yeah, just bear with me 1 second. Just hold on 1 second. I got to check something real quick. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see what you all are saying. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, so somebody said they're over the entire story, just like when white people don't care when they use 911 to make false calls to the cops on black people. Yeah, so I'm going to get to that comment. I take this issue very seriously, man. I'm far from over this story, and I'm going to explain to you all why. And I might as well just get into that right now. When you have situations where people make these false claims of racism, false claims of a hate crime, that has a devastating impact on our community, man. So for that reason, I have great concern about that. It bothers me when our own people create fake situations. I mean, this whole situation, as I pointed out in that first video that I did, it reminded me of Tawana Brawley. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the situation, it's basically something that happened in New York years ago where this teenage girl staged this whole hate crime, claimed that she was attacked by some prominent white people and stuff like that, completely made up a story. And a grand jury found out that she made up a story. They found that she made up the story and all that kind of stuff. But before that finding, you had activists like Al Sharpton out here marching in the streets, advocating on her behalf and all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff sets us back, not hundreds of years, but it sets us back a great deal. And it makes legitimate claims of racism subject to even heightened scrutiny. It makes people doubt when we really have legitimate claims of racism. And that's what makes this whole situation very troubling. Because when somebody is really a victim of a hate crime, you're going to have people say this is another hoax. That's going to be the first reaction that people have. You're going to have police officers, for instance, or law enforcement not take the issue as seriously because of this situation. And when people have legitimate complaints about racism, they're going to be downplayed. People are going to say you're playing the victim card or you're making this stuff up. That's why this stuff matters to me. This story is important. And it's a damn shame that this guy would pimp his racial identity and his sexual orientation for his own self-serving purposes. That undermines legitimate struggle. That undermines legitimate claims. And that's why it matters to me. And it should matter to all of us, man. When I'm going to just go ahead and say it now. Like when these things come out, like usually when there's a situation where I have doubts, for instance, like if there's a police brutality case, and, it's a situation where I think that perhaps the police were justified. Usually if I don't support a case, I'll just remain silent on it. I won't speak on it. I won't speak on that particular situation. But here you have a situation where this guy cooked up this story, wrote this story like a Hollywood script, just made up these false allegations of racism and anti-gay bigotry. And we're supposed to, it just made up this whole situation, man. It's something like this I can't sit back on because, again, it undermines real claims. So for me, I'm not over this. For me, it's something that needs to be discussed, man. All right, so let me just before I go to the rest of your comments, I'm just going to go into the recent developments. I'm going to share my screen again so that you all can see it, see the story. There's another article that I want to bring up as well, so just bear with me a second. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm just pulling up this other article. Oh, hold on 1 second. All right, so here's the recent development in this case. Now police say that evidence suggests that Jussie Smollett orchestrated this whole thing. So as I reported before, like there were two people who were in custody, and these people were held. They were being arrested, and then they turned over information to the police. And they basically claimed that they were paid to orchestrate an assault on this guy. You know, this, as it says here in the CNN article, it says two law enforcement sources with knowledge of the investigation tell CNN the Chicago police believe that actor Jussie Smollett paid two men to orchestrate an assault on him that he reported last month. And of course, he's denying this. He's claiming that he really was attacked and all that kind of stuff. It says the men, who are brothers, were arrested Wednesday but released without charges Friday after Chicago police cited the discovery of new evidence. And it said that these two men are fully cooperating with the police. And it says that the sources told CNN that there are records that show the two brothers purchased the rope found around Smollett's neck at a hardware store in Chicago. And then, you know, the Jussie Smollett, through his attorneys, is, you know, basically talking about how he's being victimized again by people questioning his story and stuff like that. So that's a huge development. And the thing that makes this so significant is that the people who are accused of participating in this crime, you know, this hoax or whatever, are two Nigerian guys, as you see in this picture. Here are these two Nigerian brothers. They're, you know, biological brothers. They know this guy. I read reports that at least one of them knows him, works with him on Empire. So he knows these people. And, you know, the initial reports claimed that he was attacked by two white guys. And in his interview, you know, he talked about how he could see part of the, you know, part of the face of the person. You know, I'm assuming like near the eyes, like he was saying, like near the eyes. And he described these suspects as being white men and stuff like that. But it turns out that it's two Nigerian guys. This raises a huge red flag. It makes it clear to me, you know, the fact that these suspects are two Nigerian brothers and one of them knows him. This tells me that more likely than not, the police are probably correct in this situation. This probably was a staged hoax, you know, orchestrated by this guy. And according to some of the reports that I read, you know, this guy feared that he was going to be written off of Empire. So he staged this whole thing to win over public sympathy. And you see, like shortly after this incident happened, you had all these celebrities, you know, voicing their support for him. You had all these, you know, civil rights people and all that kind of stuff, and people in the media pouring out all this love and support for him. So he probably figured that, you know, with all that public support behind him, it would be difficult for Empire to write him off of the show, you know, if these allegations are correct. But I mean, the fact that you had these two Nigerians here, I mean, you can't tell me that this this just raises makes it impossible for me to believe that this was an actual real attack on him. You know, how are you going to mix up the suspects? Like, how are you going to confuse these two black African guys with some white guys? First of all, even if you couldn't see their face, you would hear their voices. You would hear an accent. They will make it clear to you that these are not white men. Two Nigerian guys saying mega country. I mean, this whole thing doesn't even make sense, man. It's just crazy. So that's the development in the case. Let me see if there's something else that's mentioned in this other article that I saw. Just bear with me 1 second. And the fact that they will release them says a lot. And it's possible that Jussie Smollett may face charges for putting out this false report. And they basically said this, they said that we can confirm that the information received from the individuals questioned by the police earlier in the Empire case has in fact shifted the trajectory of the investigation. So now they want to question Jussie Smollett. They want to question him about his involvement in this situation. They have further questions for him because of this development. And they said that it comes 2 days after, the police denied reports claiming that the police believed the incident to be a hoax. But apparently it's clear now they are definitely being upfront about how they believe that this is a hoax. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to go back to your comments. Yeah, so let me go to your comments, see what you all are saying. Yeah, so Elaine Lloyd said, I wonder why he paid Black people to do it. There must have been some white extras. Yeah, man, it's just crazy, man. And then one thing that really locked him in to this whole fact that these are the people, because the police were able to confirm that those people captured in that video footage walking on the street were in fact those two Nigerian brothers. And then Jussie Smollett, during his interview, he says, well, yeah, it's no doubt in my mind that those two people are, in fact, the people that attacked me. So he's locked into that. There's no wiggling out of that. So it's clear that those Nigerian brothers are the ones that allegedly attacked this guy. So that makes it difficult for him to weasel out of this whole scenario that's been painted and laid out before us, man. That these Nigerian guys worked with him to stage this fake ass attack. Man, this is just crazy, man. As I was saying before, man, this is going to set the Black community back years. This is going to set back the gay community back years. Again, it's like a whole nother Tawani Brawley type of situation. Tawana Brawley situation. And it's just going to give, fodder to the far right that always questions people about playing victim, that always talks about how people are exaggerating claims of racism. People like that Candace Owens Coon are running with this whole story. They're using this to highlight how Black people like to play victim, highlighting, the left and stuff like that, making it seem like the left is exaggerating all the time, lying all the time, and all that kind of stuff. They're using this to undermine legitimate claims of racism. So let me go on to what you all are saying. But I just have to make another point too. Like when I initially questioned this whole story, some people accused me of being insensitive, basically saying that because this involved a gay person, that's the only reason why I'm questioning whether or not it in fact happened, because it's a gay victim and it's an anti-gay crime, that because I'm a heterosexual man, I can't relate to the story, or I'm not sympathetic to the story and all that kind of stuff. So that's one thing that people tried to suggest when I raised this whole thing. And then you have these people online that are basically trying to guilt shame people, guilt trip people into supporting this whole thing, by making it seem like you just don't care about the LGBT community and all that kind of stuff. And then another point that was raised that I kind of, mentioned briefly is this whole idea of being on code and stuff like that. this whole idea that, well, you shouldn't question, a black person who's raising claims of racism and stuff like that. You should stay on code and just be silent or be supportive of them and all that kind of stuff. That's one thing that people basically said. And, there was, it's one person that I was talking to talked about how really, in the light of the history of the white man, nothing is really far-fetched. And I think that that's there's some validity to that whole assertion, but this is ridiculous, man. This whole situation, the facts around it just seem to be completely irrational and out of the box. So I just could not buy into the story. I just couldn't. Another thing that people are doing is they have basically been trying to use the distrust that we have for the police department to defend this Jussie Smollett guy, man, to defend his ridiculous story. They're saying, well, you can't believe anything that the police say. And I get that. I've done plenty of videos where I've expressed my distrust for, certain elements in in law enforcement, just based on the long history of police brutality, based on the long history of discrimination, racial profiling, and disrespect. So I get that. I understand why people distrust the police. I understand why they don't trust the police in Chicago, especially after they tried to cover up what happened to Laquan McDonald. So I get that. I understand that. But the facts here make this story just to be ridiculous on its face, man. And all the questions that I raised and all that kind of stuff make it to be outrageous, man. And I can't ignore reality just because I have some kind of distrust towards law enforcement. At some point, reason has to, overcome like emotionalism. And that's what a lot of times people do. Like they try to appeal to your emotions instead of dealing with logic and common sense, man. And that's what a lot of these people have been doing, trying to guilt people into supporting this guy, trying to make you out to be the bad guy for raising the questions and stuff, for thinking for yourself. And then on another hand, you have, this whole situation exposes race baiters as well. These people that are so eager, waiting with bated breath for some racial incident to happen so they can get on here and start talking about it and being outraged about it and stuff. Either here on YouTube or on Twitter and stuff like that, or Facebook. It's like people that participate in a whole industry of outrage, an industry where it's like something to do, something for them to profit off of, outrage. So a lot of those people, they ignored the legitimate questions because they just want to run with what is sensational and stuff. So yeah, I just had to express those thoughts, but I'm gonna get into your questions or your comments right now. Man, it's just messed up, man. Yeah, man, it's the story of going to a Subway at 2 in the morning in the cold ass weather. And you got these guys just waiting around, just walking around with some noose. They just happen to be out there at that particular time when this guy from Empire is out at night. And then that fake ass letter, that threatening letter he allegedly received. I mean, it looks ridiculous, man. That's somebody else. I think it was somebody that talked about how it looked like a letter written in one of those Austin Power movies or something. Just so comical and so ridiculous, man. So now when people have legitimate issues, when they get a legitimate threat, people are going to question it now. Yeah, that whole thing about Elaine, shout out to Elaine Lloyd. Yeah, that whole thing about that noose was just stupid, man. You actually expect people to believe you're just going to be walking around chilling with a noose on, waiting for the police to see this noose. And then somebody said, I'm starting to wonder if he has a mental illness. Wow, that may be legitimate, man. That's a legitimate point. Shout out to Morgan for raising that question. Yeah, so BB said, make America great again, noose, bleach. She said, oh man. She called the guy like a conniving liar. Yeah, you're right, man. Crazy. And she said, please don't confuse legitimate people who are sick with conniving, clout chasing people. BB said in Nino Brown's voice, the trick is canceled. She said, I don't watch that garbage filled show. I used to check out that show, man. It was like, I mean, it's a highly overly dramatic and over the top. Like, and they have good music on this show and stuff like that. They overemphasize the gay stuff, man. But other than that, like, it was an entertaining show. I ain't gonna front on anything like that. I watch that show every now and then. Um, yeah, and then that's another thing, like how like those politicians jumped on it. You had like Kamala Harris and Cory Booker immediately jump on this. And I understand it. Like you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. You want to say, well, yeah, I'm gonna assume that they're telling the truth and all that kind of stuff. And I get that. But something about this story, as I said before, just rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, man, this can't be real. It just can't be, man. Because it's not adding up. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, I don't know how they carried that stuff around the leg. I don't know if they had a book bag or what, man, a backpack, because it just seems crazy. You just walking around at 2 something in the morning in the cold winter weather with a noose and some bleach. Yeah, so somebody said this is terrible. When someone starts calling people racist, I don't listen anymore. And that's not good. Exactly, that's not good. I mean, you all are familiar with the childhood story called The Boy Who Cried Wolf. You know, this little boy kept crying, wolf, wolf, like he was in danger. Some wolf was attacking or something like that. He kept doing this, and people eventually said, we don't believe this kid. He's a liar and stuff like that. And then when the wolf was actually there, um, nobody believed him. And that's what's going to happen to us when we got people like this Jussie Smollett. When there's a real situation, people going to think you crying wolf again. Oh, I'm not familiar with that story, BB. I need to look into that. I think I saw something about that story about the 9-year-old who was arrested for not standing for the national anthem. I saw that in passing. I'm going to look into that, investigate it, and I may do a video about that story. Yeah, I'm going to look into that. I'll look into that, check it out. I may come back on here later on tonight. BB said, damn, not the Nigerians again. Yeah, man, it's horrible that Nigerians have such a horrible reputation as scam artists and stuff. It's sad too, man, because there are a lot of accomplished Nigerians in, in America, like a lot of immigrants from Nigeria who do great things. They become doctors, lawyers, scientists, and they're very accomplished people. But because of a small bad element amongst them, they have a reputation of being scam artists. So here you had these two Nigerian brothers participating in this scam on the public, man. Assuming that these allegations are correct. And at this point, I believe that they're correct. I believe that this man made up this whole thing. This whole thing is crazy. And Bibi said, I'm sure his motivation was LGBT politics, not black politics, basically. And people on Rashu basically said that people on Twitter are saying that it was a bad date gone wrong. Um, I don't know, with these Nigerian brothers being captured and stuff, arrested, and then released. Like, I don't know if that's what happened. Like, I really think that he staged this whole thing, man. At this point, according to what people are saying. Now, somebody said, shame on you for calling Candace a coon. Man, that woman is a damn coon, and I don't make no apologies for calling her that. And I could do a whole video on that, but I'm not going to waste my time talking about her right now. All you have to do is go to my I Declare War channel and check out my videos over there where I discuss that woman. I don't make any apologies for calling her a coon at all. Yeah, and then that guy called himself the gay Tupac, man. That was so crazy. So ridiculous, man. Comparing himself to Tupac, a hip hop legend. That guy ain't nowhere near on Tupac's level, man. And it's like he really just milked this whole thing for everything that it's worth, like the statements he made at his concert, and it just helps him out. Like, it helps him with his sales for his concerts, for his events, all this public sympathy. It's a good business decision in the short run for him to make up this fake little staged ass incident and stuff like that. And I know those people that went all out for him, defending him, and doing all these videos or making all these statements on Twitter. I know they feel ridiculous right now, but I don't blame them. I understand how people want to trust. They actually have a natural inclination to trust people, to sympathize with people. So I don't blame them so much as I blame him. Shout out to David Bowman. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, it's ridiculous he would compare himself to Tupac, man. A legend, somebody like Tupac with legendary albums and, classic albums and stuff like that. Somebody that's a legend who's going to live on for years, through his music. Somebody said this may be a psyop. Just bear with me a second. Somebody said that Cardi B said this nigga fucked up Black History Month, and I agree with her. Yeah, you're right, man. That's crazy, man, that something like this would happen during Black History Month, where he would be exposed for this. I mean, the actual incident happened last month, but the fact that it's the truth behind it is coming out during Black History Month is horrible, man. It's a disgrace. So yeah, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I truly appreciate your support. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Also, I want to let you all know that on my art channel, I'm going to do a very short little live stream to let you all know about some things that I'm working on when it comes to art. I hope you all can join me over there. I will post a link in the description box, in the comment section. And also, I'm going to just post the link right now. If you bear with me, I'm going to post the link in the chat room so that you'll know where to find my art channel. Is called the Osaka Gallery. I hope that you all can subscribe to that channel. Over there, I display my drawings and my paintings. In addition to doing this social commentary, I also am very much interested in art. You know, I draw and paint, and I hope you all can subscribe to that channel. I want to show people my Black History Month art series. So every day during Black History Month, I have been drawing pictures of prominent African-American figures in our history. So I hope that you all can join me over there. So before I go, I'm going to pull up the link and post it in the chat room and in the description box and in the comment section. So just bear with me one quick second so I can get that up for you. Yeah, I should be up with that live stream in about 15 minutes. So just bear with me. So here's the link to my art channel. I'm posting it in the chat room so that y'all can go over there, subscribe to it, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content. Yeah, and also I want to let you all know that all my art is for sale over there. So yeah, so I'll join you in a few minutes. Thank you for your support. Again, please rate, comment, and subscribe. Like the video, share the video, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you.